Hello everyone and welcome to this series of videos on the Deep Blue Garry Kasparov matches. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we are up to the 1996 match Game 5 with Deep Blue White and Kasparov Black with the match score poised at 2-2. And indeed it looked like the momentum, if you can talk about that with an engine, was really on Deep Blue's side after a very good black game in which Garry was straining his nerves to the maximum just to keep the position in the drawing zone. So looked pretty promising. The only problem was that Deep Blue had achieved nothing against Garry's Sicilian with the C3 Sicilian. So there was a rest day before the fifth game, and the Deep Blue team with Joel Benjamin, they found some new ideas in the C3 Sicilian, and they decided that they were ready to go. However, Garry had his own little surprise for them. So let's have a look at the game, because after E4. Garry played 1e5. Feng-hsiung says in Behind Deep Blue, was he afraid of our treatment of the C3 Sicilian? Who knows? Garry basically decided that it was time to switch things around. Unfortunately, there wasn't really very much prepared for 1e5, and what Feng-hsiung says is that 2 months before the match, Murray Campbell, that's another big programmer for Deep Blue, and also somebody whose scientific papers we're going to study when we look at the 1997 match. He spent a few hours putting in some alternative book lines, just in case that Garry played something else. Very little testing had been done with these alternative lines, and the fact we'd never tested the opening showed in the way Deep Blue played the game. And indeed these alternative lines were not very impressive. So Garry played the Petrov, and to be honest, it would have been pretty sensible for Deep Blue to play just play a mainline Petrov. I mean, it's not going to be bad anyway. But what happened was that Deep Blue went for a very, very dull line, which is a line of the Scotch, but played in the good old-fashioned boring way. At various times, White players have given this a go and tried to make something of it, but to me, it's never looked like anything at all. I can't understand why you'd even think you could make something of it, to be honest. Deep Blue didn't get very far here. So takes, castles, bishop g5, c6, queen f3, and you can even allow White to take on f6. I mean, you've got the two bishops, no problem at all really for Black. But Garry played very cautiously, bishop e7, probably fitting his strategy of just never. Not giving Deep Blue anything concrete really to latch onto. Probably still thinking of that first game where double pawns turned out to be quite nasty. So rook e1 played by Deep Blue, rook e8, and now knight e2. Actually, Deep Blue's playing this quite reasonably, quite sensibly. This knight's heading over to the king's side somehow, and c4 is coming in as well. H6 played by Garry. There was a game Mark Condy against Ian Thomas, Oakham Young Masters 1986, that had gone knight g4 in this position, but H6 was played by Garry, very sensible. Bishop f4 and then bishop d6 after 26 minutes thought. Nothing much is really happening in this position. There's no real kingside attack happening. Pieces are getting exchanged, and there's plenty of space for the black pieces. Deep Blue played knight d4. Maybe a little bit. That knight is going to be a little bit exposed somehow when Black plays queen b6. So the engines were preferring h3 in this position, and then taking back with a knight on f4, which looks quite sensible. But it's nothing much either. Or you could even take with a queen and then bring the knight over to g3. That also looks quite reasonable. Knight d4 just a little bit ends up a little bit awkward. Bishop g4 from Garry. Queen g3 takes, and then queen b6. And yeah, here Deep Blue could have done an awful lot of things. b3 is completely possible. Also a preliminary h3 followed by b3, also played by the engines. I mean, there's always little stuff like queen b4. I mean, that's not worrying for an engine. For a human, it's slightly worrying because you start thinking, oh, God, that irritating pin. What am I going to do about that? But yeah, you know, I mean, it's nothing much. Well, Deep Blue played an interesting idea, c4. So not worrying about the b2 pawn because c6 hangs, and then we get the knight into e7, maybe some chances or whatever. And you're just trying to you know, to take on d5 and maybe create an isolated pawn there. But it's not bad for black. I mean, black's got lots of play here. Bishop d7 from Garry. Yeah, nice and cautious, really, just protecting the c6 pawn and then threatening him to take on b2. C takes d5. C takes d5, rook e8, rook e8. And yeah, I mean, there's just all sorts of ways of playing here. Knight b3 is one idea, just looking to play queen d4. That would be a nice idea. You play knight e4 as black, and maybe just rook e1 here, for example. Just attacking the knight, maybe looking to play queen e3. You know, that's quite possible. Yeah, you know, black's got ideas like playing a5 to a4. It's not you know, dead or anything like that, but it is, you know, just balanced. What Deep Blue did was fine too. Played the move queen d2. And Garry, you know, before Deep Blue manages to consolidate too much, Garry played the move knight e4 and just transformed basically his isolated d pawn into well, a kingside pawn majority here. And b3 was played by Deep Blue here, quite reasonable, and rook d8. And well, in behind Deep Blue, Feng-hsiung explains by move 23, Garry had gained a slight advantage. It's probably around even, but I guess, you know, if anyone looks like it might be a bit better, it feels like black, really, with a slight space advantage there, and bishop against a knight in a sort of an open position. He was a little bit, Feng-hsiung, I was a little nervous about the position on the board. Back in the deep thought days, I once played through a game where one side had such a kingside pawn majority in attacks against the king, and deep thought too had severe problems understanding the value of the kingside pawn majority in attacks against the king. Deep Blue had the potential to understand the position on the chessboard, but I suspect the software coding had not been done yet. So what he's saying there is that, you know, Deep Blue could evaluate something like this in hardware, but yeah, it wasn't quite clear whether they'd had time to activate that in the software yet. But in actual fact, yeah, you know, there was a very quick decision about the draw offer, which caught, you know, the Deep Blue team by surprise, and in the end they decided to continue. Unfortunately, that turned out to be a really unfortunate decision, because somehow Deep Blue just started playing very planlessly from here. I do actually think that it's possibly again an artifact of that decision to make Deep Blue keep the queens on and sort of discourage it from exchanging off the queens. Because I think if at a number of occasions here, if Deep Blue had just gone for an exchange of queens, offering the exchange of queens, there would have been no problems at all. But I think it you know, unless that bug that they'd that programming bias that they put in, that they noticed in game 2, unless they'd taken it out, I suspect that was the problem. Because well, queen c3 happened here, f5 from Garry. Now rook d1, which is fine, you know, not a problem. A little bit weird, maybe just to self-pin yourself like that, but it's not a big problem. Bishop e6 played by Garry. Bishop e8 would also have been a possibility. That was the one that the engines preferred. Yeah, queen e3 played, which is a little bit of a strange move, really. Queen doesn't have to go there. You would have sort of said something like h3 followed by, you know, moves like rook d2 and then just exchange off rooks. Offer some sort of exchange. That would be a pretty natural way to do things somehow. Queen e3 was played. Bishop f7, and now something a little bit strange happened. Queen c3. Again, you would have sort of, expected something maybe like rook d2, for example. And then at some stage you'll eventually you'll move that knight away from d4 and offer the exchange of rooks, for example. But queen c3 played back again, and now Garry played the move f4. Queen f6, even stronger according to the engines, and after rook d2 you go rook d6, and the big problem here is that white isn't really able to unpin properly and offer an exchange of rooks. So yeah, and this eternal pin is going to be quite nasty when f4 comes in. Garry's move was slightly inaccurate because after rook d2, queen f6, because the rook is still on the back rank here, we could have played the move knight e2 in this position, deep blue. Obviously, if you go queen c3, I go rook takes d8 check, and if we play the move rook takes d2, queen d2, queen a1, we can go knight c1. It's not completely comfortable, but actually it's not too bad for white. White can definitely survive this. Unfortunately, after g3, played by deep blue, this is now minus 4.86 according to the engines, because Garry played a good move. Rook d6 would have been strong, but rook d5 is also strong, and now you can't do this unpinning with knight e2 because it's not rook takes d8 check, and so white's in an internal pin here, and this is absolutely awful. So a3 was played, king h7, getting out of any checks there, king g2, queen e5, just creeping forwards. There's nothing really that white can do. White just can't work out a way to move this knight away now and unpin. So yeah, it's just going to be very, very bad, and everything that deep blue did made it worse, but yeah, it was just terrible anyway. Rook d3, e2 happened. Those were the days that you could do this against an engine. G takes f4, e1 queen, f takes e5. Garry took the piece, and well, deep blue's got two pawns for the pieces rather, but yeah, it's just totally horrible really. It's not good pawns at all. So b4, bishop c4 played, just keeping the rook under wraps there. g5, rook d2 check, rook d3, swapping off the rooks there. Bishop c2, king f5, king d5, h5, and the deep blue team resigned. Very, very dramatic, and such a poor game from deep blue after after having played quite decently. Obviously got nothing out of the opening as white, so that was in general you'd say the opening preparation, as for much of that 1996 match, was somewhat under par. But deep blue played fine, but just somehow something went wrong here, and just maybe didn't appreciate the power of such an eternal pin, but also played maybe some bias in terms of not exchanging pieces against Garry, whereas the simplest thing would have been just a rook d2 and get the pieces exchanged, and then you're absolutely fine. Maybe some sort of bias there sort of prevented deep blue from going for that. And well, this was child's play for Garry. Just this was slightly inaccurate, but after that other inaccuracy, g3, then after rook d5, eternal pin, and it's child's play for black to win that. So there we are. I mean, that turned the match on its head. Garry was leading 3-2, couldn't lose the match, had white in the last game, and suddenly the deep blue team needed to find an opening that could lead to a win with black, which was not at all in their planning at all. That was likely to be tough, and well, find out what happened in game 6 in the next video.